The Roman soldier did not shout. Around him, the formation was failing. Dust rose as sandals turned backward. Shields struck stone as men who had marched together since dawn now chose distance over duty. The sound was not panic at first. It was permission. One step back, then another. Fear travels faster when it appears reasonable. He felt it before he saw it, the subtle pull in the line, the way weight shifted when men stopped trusting the ground beneath them. When one retreats, another feels invited. When several move, retreat begins to look like intelligence. He did not move, not because he believed himself braver, not because he imagined songs or reward. He remained because his feet were where the line had been drawn, and nothing external had yet altered that fact. Commands dissolved into noise. Officers shouted into movement that no longer listened. The enemy had not yet reached him, but the greater threat was already present. He could have gone with them. No one would have marked his name. No record would survive. Fear had become acceptable. Retreat had become common. Still, he stayed. His shield did not rise higher. His stance did not widen. He simply refused to join a decision that had not been his to make. This was not a moment of strength. It was a moment of restraint. And restraint, in the Stoic world, was never weakness. Roman military discipline was not built on heroics. It was built on predictability. The legion functioned because each man understood that the line mattered more than the individual outcome. A Roman soldier was trained to hold position even when separated, even when frightened, even when orders became unclear. This was not because Rome expected courage at all times, but because Rome understood something older than philosophy. Human behavior is contagious. If one man breaks formation, others follow. If enough men follow, defeat arrives before the enemy strikes. Stoic philosophy emerged from the same understanding. Marcus Aurelius wrote not for triumph, but for endurance. Seneca did not praise bold action. He warned against emotional contagion. Epictetus trained students to recognize that the most dangerous forces were not external threats, but internal movements that felt justified. The battlefield made this lesson unavoidable. A soldier who fled early often survived the moment, but endangered the whole. A soldier who held the line sometimes died, but preserved structure long enough for order to return. Rome rewarded discipline, not impulse. The soldier in this moment did not consider doctrine. He did not recite maxims. He acted from training so deep it no longer required language. Stoicism was never abstract to Rome. It was practiced under pressure. And pressure reveals what philosophy has become embodied. The principle is simple, but not easy. Do not abandon your position merely because others do. Stoicism teaches that virtue is not reactive. It does not take its cues from crowds, fear, or urgency. It responds only to what reason determines to be necessary. The Roman soldier did not stay because staying felt safe. He stayed because leaving had not yet been required. This distinction matters. Most failure does not begin with terror. It begins with borrowed judgment. We look sideways to see what others are doing and mistake movement for wisdom. Stoic discipline demands that action be anchored internally, not to ego, not to pride, but to clarity. The soldier's clarity was this: my duty has not changed. My position has not been overrun. My responsibility remains, so he remained. This is not stubbornness, it is discernment. Stoicism does not forbid retreat. It forbids unexamined retreat. It demands that withdrawal be chosen for the right reasons, not adopted through emotional imitation. The line was still his to hold. So he held it. Fear rarely announces itself as fear. It arrives as logic, as caution, as consensus. The soldier felt the pull of bodies moving away. The nervous system responds before thought. Muscles prepare to follow. Survival instincts do not wait for permission. This is the tension Stoicism trains against. When many people choose the same direction, resistance feels irrational. Standing still begins to look like ignorance. Courage becomes suspect. But Stoics warn that the crowd is not a measure of truth. It is a measure of momentum. Seneca wrote that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. On the battlefield, imagination spreads faster than steel. The soldier's fear was not of the enemy. It was of isolation. To remain while others flee is to accept temporary separation, and separation is one of the oldest human anxieties. Stoicism does not remove this fear. It disciplines it. The soldier did not suppress fear. He refused to obey it. Stoic practice is not meditation alone. It is rehearsal under imagined pressure, so that action under real pressure does not surprise the mind. Roman soldiers trained to stand while others advanced, to advance while others held, to obey structure even when emotion rebelled. This is Stoic training made physical. Epictetus taught students to distinguish between what is up to them and what is not. The soldier could not control the retreat of others. He could control his feet. So he controlled his feet. Practice begins here. When fear spreads, do not immediately move. Pause. Assess. Confirm your position. Has your duty changed? Has reality shifted? Or has emotion simply grown louder? The soldier answered these questions without words. His training had already done the thinking. This is the Stoic ideal. Preparedness replaces panic. Moments later, the line stabilized. Officers reformed ranks around points of resistance. Not everyone returned, but enough did. The soldier did not become famous, but his position mattered. Stoic insight is rarely celebrated. It is noticed only when absence would have caused collapse. Holding the line is not about glory. It is about preventing unnecessary loss. Clarity is not dramatic, it is steady. The soldier learned nothing new in that moment. He confirmed what discipline had already taught him. That virtue is quiet, that restraint is strength, that not every movement deserves imitation. Today, the battlefield looks different. The line is your values, your standards, your commitments. People leave jobs in panic, abandon principles for convenience, retreat from discomfort because others normalize it. Stoicism asks the same question it asked the Roman soldier. Has your position actually been overrun? If not, stand. Do not remain out of pride, remain out of clarity. When others quit early, pause. When fear becomes fashionable, pause. When retreat feels reasonable, pause. Standing does not mean rigidity, it means discernment. Move when movement is required. Remain when remaining is enough. The Roman soldier did not hold the line because he was fearless. He held it because fear had not yet earned authority. Stand where you are until reason tells you otherwise. Not every retreat is wisdom. Not every movement is survival. Sometimes the most disciplined act is stillness.